It's good to talk to you, Professor C.S. Swami.
Yeah.
And I would like to start by asking you something about your education, work experience before you came to IIT, and then why you chose IIT.
See, let me start with my birth. So I was born in Bhadravati. Uh, it is in Mysore state, present day Karnataka. It's almost bordered on the forest in those days. And according to the Bharatatna Visvesvaraya, who used to say, industrialize or perish. So he was the person who started the steel factory and paper factory at Bhadravati. Now I started my education only in Bangalore when I was almost 6 to 7 years old, because I think I was a sickly child during my young days, and straight away I entered the 4th class in primary school, and after completing it I went into the 5th class in middle school. Middle school is 4 years in those days. That means I had already learnt about alphabets and a little bit of reading the local language Kannada, Canaries, and a little bit of English. So I straight away entered the middle school first year, and where my elder brother was also studying 3rd year. And then after about 1.5 years or so, it so happened that the school was divided into 2 parts. So some students who were beyond a particular area who were living, they were transferred to another school. So the government said. So one fine day, I was told after in the morning, before the lunch, that this afternoon some principal of another school is going to come. These students are going to study in another school tomorrow. I didn't know what it meant. So when I came for lunch, I used to rush for lunch during the interval. I told my mother, I am being sent to another school. My brother thought it was a joke. But afternoon, suddenly our principal and another teacher came and said, read out my names and some other names. You are asked to stand outside, form a line. They were told you are being taken to a new school. So we were taken to a new school. We were introduced. We sang the national anthem or the state anthem because we were still not gained independence. And then we were told, can you reach your house? And I asked, which class is this? And they said, this is 13th class Malaysian Bangalore. Then I said, my house is between 11th and 10th class. And I asked the teacher, sir, if I go in this direction, will I reach a banyan tree? He said, exactly, there's a big banyan tree. Then from there I know my house, sir. So others who didn't know, he said, I will take you back to the old school. From there you know how to reach us. But then it was a sudden thing. But then nothing could be done because the government had given the order. So I studied there for about 1.5 years, and then at the final, that means 47, I had to come to the lower secondary, which means 8th standard. We have a public examination. So my father thought that I must go back to that other school, which is much better. So he sent an application to the DEO and me transferred in that school. So in my school education, it so happened that from that time onwards, I was considered as a very good student, was going to bring a state rank and all that, but it didn't happen. Then I joined a government high school in 1948, and then by around that time, we also shifted our residence. My father bought a house very near the high school. That building even now exists in Bangalore. It is a stone building and with a clock tower on the top, and very near the Institute of Science. And I started studying there. Now it so happened that myself and my brother, elder brother, we were very much in admiration of Mahatma Gandhi. So one day we were walking on a street and we saw that somebody is going to teach us Hindi. And then we both of us entered there, and then we asked, what are you going to teach? He said, we are going to teach oral Hindi, that means to talk in Hindi. And then it just costs you 1 rupee to appear for the examination. It is a 1-month course. And then we both joined. And then after 1 month or 2 months, the examination was conducted. We both passed in first class. That means, what's your name, what are you studying, something like that, what is your parents, a very simple thing one. Then the first Prathamik, Madhyamik like this. But then I never knew at that time what a public examination is. This was when I was in middle school, not even high school. So I think what I did was, it is an anecdote I can say, I filled up the marks which is obtained. In that column I filled up the full marks for the question, which I put in the question paper. I put 100 on the total. And then my parents had told me, don't write your name. I didn't write my name, but I came back. Naturally, my paper was rejected. I failed. So I said, oh, Hindi is not for me. I left off. And after 2 years, once again started Hindi. And to tell you, in the whole of high school for 3 years, the second language I took Hindi. I had no tuition. I didn't have examination except in the final secondary school living certificate, what you call SLC, that is 11th class. And then I took the examination on my own. By then I had already come to the 4th examination in Dakshin Bharat Hindi Prachar Sabha, what is called as Praveshika. Then within 1 year or so, when I was about 16, I got the first degree, Rashtrabhasha Visharad. So in the college also for about 2 years plus another 2 years, 4 years, I did self-study and I used to only write the final examination Hindi. There was no this one. And then this is so when I was in intermediate, naturally the tendency in those days was to enter engineering because that was the one which was paying. So you could get jobs easily and then you could get good salary. Naturally parents encouraged. So what was important was you should get very good marks in mathematics, physics and chemistry. In fact, I had got very high marks, but then due to certain quota system, even on the quota system I had scored very high, but I didn't get a seat because I had not met the selection committee member who was in charge of selecting students under that quota. And I joined BSc degree and I had applied for chemistry honors in Central College, that is Mysore University. And in the second or third list I was selected. First I felt that had been a mistake, but then I remembered what I had promised myself when I was in school. See, my elder brother, we used to have a grammar book, I think Renan Martin or some authors, and then the author was M.A. Oxon, D.Litt. London. It means M.A. in Oxford and doctoral literature in London. So my brother used to write against his name, M.A. Oxon, D.Litt. London. So when one of the chemistry books we got, and I found the author was MSc PhD. Then I said, I am going to be MSc PhD in chemistry. Well, why was I got interested in chemistry? Purely because when my brother used to come and describe about the experiment that a teacher had shown in the class, I really got excited about things. If I choose, I am going to choose this subject. But then I forgot all this when I was studying in college because the question of employment, the question of my father had retired, we were 6 children and all those economic conditions made me think of engineering. Once I didn't get it and joined chemistry, well, my goal was settled. So sometime around that time, one of the professors in the University of Science, he was not a professor then, he was a faculty member, was a family friend of ours, Vasudeva Murthy. and he got his DSc degree. And one of his nephews, who was my classmate in school, he came home to tell me that my uncle has got his DSc degree, Vice University. Then immediately I just pricked one of my fingers and then wrote in a diary with blood that I am going to get a PhD degree in chemistry. So, and it was when I was in honors. And then it so happened that once I finished honors, again an opening came for engineering. In the sense, IISc Bangalore used to admit students who have passed BSc honors and MSc to diploma in metallurgy. And in metallurgy was a very, very paying field because India was opening up, steel factories were coming up. So the rank students were being taken, and I was the second rank holder. And therefore, I was advised by Professor Vasudevamurthy, my family friend, to take up. I applied for it, but then after realizing that I could not pay the fees, I gave it up and then joined MSc in Central College Cell, continued for 1 year, took my MSc degree once again in first class. But even before I got my result, I had gone to Indian Institute of Science and joined research because my senior was already working for PhD there. So I just went, but when I went and joined, I told the concerned professors, well sir, I am joining this hoping that I will get a scholarship. But you say that there is only one scholarship, 125 rupees for MSc first class students. If I get it, I would continue. Otherwise, 1 year my brothers have agreed to support me, and then I will look for a job. And then it so happened that I didn't get that scholarship. It was given to somebody else. But I continued. I was interviewed by State Bank of India, interviewed by Accountant's Office. But then I picked up. I got interested in experimental work. I made friends with faculty members. And then by 1958, I had already started a research problem with Professor K.R. Krishnaswamy, who was the head of the department. In fact, I was asked to work with somebody else, but I went and requested whoever was allotting these students. I said, sir, I would like to work in the field of adsorption and catalysis. And then immediately he went and talked to the head of the department, Professor Krishnaswamy, and I was asked to join. And he was my first research supervisor. So happened that about 7-8 months later, one day I was trying to do my experiments. Maybe I had not eaten or something was wrong, I don't know. Professor Krishnaswamy walked into the lab, and my seniors were not there. And then he straight came to me and said, how is your work going on? And then I said, sir, I am doing. And then suddenly he looked at me and said, patted my back and said, the IISc is going to become a university and you are going to get a scholarship in August. So because he had also come to know that I was going to leave, so suddenly, this was such a shock to me, I started crying. I didn't know. By then he left and my seniors wanted, and I said, what happened? Then I said, this is what happened. So I just felt when he said that you don't, in a way saying don't leave, your interest in research continue. Then the information spread in the whole research community, and then somebody came and suddenly asked me, why don't you apply for a CSIR scholarship? I had the form with me. Then I took the form. For the first time, CSIR was giving junior and senior research fellowships. It was the first time. And the form was got. Then I went and met the head of the department and told him, sir, can I apply for this? He said, go ahead. But I tell you, you're anyway going to get the institute scholarship. But then he recommended this one and sent. in June 58, I was called for interview to Delhi. And then within 10 days, I got information that I had got a scholarship, 200 rupees. The institute was supposed to give scholarship from August, but I got it from June. And the interview committee consisted of the senior most professors in chemistry from Delhi University and all that. And it so happened that only 2 students of the entire Indian Institute of Science that applied for it. I was one of those. And then within 4 months, they increased the scholarship to 250 rupees. And there was a contingency grant. So although I was the junior most student, research scholar, I was paid the maximum amount. So, and from next year onwards, people started applying for junior research fellowship. But then, having got the scholarship, now my aim is to finish my PhD early. So that encouraged me to start corresponding with professors abroad, doing the research in the proper way, in the sense indexing, preparing index cards, doing extensive survey, research survey and all that. And then by the time within 1.5 years to 2 years, I felt I had done sufficient research work for my PhD. So by then, Professor Krishna Swami has retired. Professor M.R.A. Rao had taken over head of the department, and he was my supervisor. He had agreed to be my supervisor. Then he was surprised when I told him that 2 years I have completed my work. And then we started reading, checking the data and checking all the information. And it was 1960. It so happened that I had to go to Kharagpur for some personal work to IIT Kharagpur. And 2 times I went, and I knew M.V.C. Shastri, Dr. M.V.C. Shastri at that time. He was an assistant professor there. I met him once in October 1960. Well, that time he invited me to his house, and then we were talking something about our work. And then Professor C.N.R. Rao, Bharat C.N.R. Rao, he was actually his student for a few months. And so he told me a few things about him, and he was a faculty member already in the Institute of Science. So I came back and we exchanged. And then again I went back 2 months later. By then I had already started discussing my research work with my professor. So I had even taken some samples to be worked in IIT Kharagpur. It also happened that Professor S.K. Bhattacharya, who was the head of the Department of Chemistry there, had attended the second International Congress in Catalysis in Paris. And he was the only Indian who had attended the first International Congress also, which was held in USA. And it so happened that I was interested in going through the proceedings. So before meeting Professor Bhattacharya, I went to Dr. M.V.C. Shastri, and I had by then decided that since I was going to complete my PhD, I was thinking why not I do a postdoctoral with a different group. I had thought of NCL Pune, but then there was nobody working in catalysis then. I wanted to go to Professor M.V.C. Shastri, so working on adsorption, and he has guided a large number of students. So I asked him about the possibility of a senior fellowship. Then he told me there is an IIT coming up in Madras. I said, I know about it, it's already there. I said, no, they are going to advertise for chemistry faculty, it's going to come in a big way, you go there. I didn't know that he was already aiming to move to IIT Madras, but anyway I came back, and then the few months passed away, and it so happened my senior, who was not interested in writing up his thesis, suddenly started writing his thesis in my absence. And then the professor was busy with so many things. He said, your senior is started discussing, so unless I finish his work, I would not like to take back your work. I will not take your thesis. Then something which I cannot forget, my life. On my 21st birthday, the day I completed 20 years, my honors result was announced and I had passed in first division. On my 25th birthday, in 1961, I just went to my professor, took my blessings in the usual way, then told him, "Sir, today I complete 25 years. I had planned on my own, by today I would be a PhD holder and I would be settled in some job." He was simply taken aback. I said, "I have not done it. So what do you feel, sir?" He said, "Yes, you are right." And then immediately he said, he asked me what. I said, "You see, there is commitment to my parents, commitment to my family, the others who have helped me, so I want to." Then within 1 week or so, the advertisement came from Indian Institute of Science, Indian Institute of Technology here, IIT Madras. I was called for interview for associate lecturer with the starting salary of 375. The lecturer was 400 those days. And then I came for interview, and then interview was held in CLRI because part of the office was there. And the reason why I thought of IIT was not only because Professor Shastri told me, my seniors, Professor V. Srinivasan, I now say professor because at that time was Dr. V. Srinivasan, he joined IIT in the very first year, that is 1959. And then another senior, Professor Aramadan, joined this institute in 1961 as a lecturer. When he was offered a lecturership in Indian Institute of Science, he felt that this is an institute which is coming up. So possibility of building a department or building a sort of a group is much better here. So he had moved here. So I had the backing of these two, and I came, attended the interview, and Professor Sen Gupta was the director. The members of the selection committee was Professor D.K. Banerjee, who was a professor of organic chemistry at IISc Bangalore, who had possibly seen me in the corridors because I had a common corridor, and Professor Edanapalli of Loyola College. He was the principal at that time. He was a person working in my field, and I had met him several times. He used to come to IISc during summer vacation. He used to come and visit, and I was also in correspondence with the students, just like I was in correspondence with Professor M.V. Shastri and a large number of foreigners also. And then he knew my work. Possibly this helped me. And anyway, that night I returned back. I had already been recommended for a job in Delhi College of Engineering by my professor. That interview was 1 week later. Two of us had been recommended. So next morning, as usual, I went to the lab around 7:30, and one of the persons who used to come very early to the department was Dr. C.N.R. Rao. And at 7:30, he walked into my room and congratulated me. I said, "What?" He said, "You have got the job." Then I said, "Well, now it's no longer confidential, so I am sharing this with you. Point is, he came and told me like this." I said, "How do you know?" Then I said, "I learned from Professor Banerjee." Mm-hmm. I knew that he was working with Professor D.K. Banerjee, and he had a student from organic chemistry. I asked him. Then he has gone and told this to my professor. And then professor called me to the room and said, "I know it is confidential, but congratulations anyway. So postpone the celebration once you get the order." Within 1 month I got the order.
Let me ask you.
Yeah,
so
please.
This was when you were coming into IIT, right?
Yes, yes.
So I'm just framing this. You got your education pre and post independence.
Yeah.
And you came to IIT when it was just starting. I'm very interested to know how life was in IIT at that time and how it compares with later.
Yeah, naturally, in the 50, 60 years, the whole thing has changed. But one thing I want to tell you, 1959 to 61, IIT, this campus was not existing. So these classes were being conducted in Giddy Engineering College and part in AC College. And the boys used to stay in hostels somewhere outside. And the first hostel to be built was the Krishna Hostel. And the second hostel was Kaveri Hostel. And then the building sciences block, that is, I don't know whether it's still called as building sciences block. It was originally called as administration block, civil engineering block. Then they named it building sciences block. That was the only block that came up. Then the workshop came up. So when I came for medical examination in September 1961, so my friend or colleague, Dr. V. Srinivasan, who used to stay at Adayar at that time, 3rd Main Road, he told me, you stay with me. He started staying in a hotel. So I stayed with him. And then he brought me one day to IIT, the building science block, and chemistry was somewhere behind, and 3-4 labs were given, and there were 2 rooms given. And then I came to know only then that till for 2 years, chemistry was a part of chemical engineering. And in the first agreement that was signed between Germany and India, West Germany and India, the chemical engineering was included. All the equipment had been planned, whatever was to be obtained. And since Professor V. Srinivasan was there, they took care of 1 or 2 things which he wanted. See, one advantage of Professor V. Srinivasan was he had done a diploma in chemical engineering at the University of Science. So he had a chemical engineering background, so he could teach chemical engineering courses also, as well as chemistry courses, because he had done his master's and PhD in chemistry, physical chemistry, the 2 adsorption and catalysis. So he had advantage in both ways. And then he started the chemistry laboratory in 1959. There was only a special officer at that time. His name was L.S. Chandrakant, and he was the brother of L.S. Srinath, who later became a director. And L.S. Chandrakant, it seems to have called one day Dr. V. Srinivasan and Dr. T. Kopichan, who was in chemical engineering, gave them a lot of money, cash, and told them engage a bus, engage a taxi, or you go by bus and then buy whatever you want to establish an undergraduate laboratory, whatever glassware, chemicals, put in a taxi and bring it. So they did like this for 2 days, and they got whatever was required for running a class of 60 students or so, or I think 120 students or 100 students, something like that. And then that is how they started the chemistry laboratory. And in 1960 also, when Aramadan joined, the same thing happened. Only thing is, 1960, a few more staff members were appointed. Professor Aramadan came because to teach inorganic chemistry part of it. And then Professor Rajappa, there was an S. Rajappa, he was selected to teach organic chemistry, Dr. S. Rajappa. And another 1 or 2 technical assistants are appointed. And all these people moved in 61 to the BSP block. And when I joined, we had only 1 preparation lab, and part of the preparation lab, other side was a balance room, and 2 laboratories, and there was a storeroom, and below the storeroom there was a petrol gas plant common to chemical engineering and chemistry, because one side was chemistry, another side was chemical engineering. Okay. But chemical engineering also had some facilities built up, because the first batch students are already come to 3rd year. So in fact, I wanted to join in December, but then I got a letter from the registrar that the 2nd semester of the classes are going to start from October, and some such a thing was there. And then they said, you are appointed to start the laboratory course for physical chemistry. So I had no option, so I took leave from the Institute of Science, and then without a degree, without completing my work, I moved over to this place on 13th October 1961. So, well, according to French people, 13th may be a bad day, but for me it didn't happen so. But then I started. By then, I knew that chemistry was going to be separated from chemical engineering, and then Professor V. Srinivasan, I mean, he was the first head of the section, although he was a lecturer.
Yes.
And then we were all sitting in the preparation lab. And in November, I joined in October. November end, Professor M.V.C. Shastri joined. And then he had already, from the time he got his offer till he came here, had already made a very big plan, and he had sent inquiries and got quotations. So he came with a big plan for the department. So from the day he joined, he was very hardworking. But only thing is, as a human being, he was a bit difficult to deal with. He was a very hardworking person himself, but then it is something which goes with certain people, maybe for various reasons. But I almost thought of leaving this in December because of certain things for which I was accused, which I was not ready to accept. But in any way, I continued, and in January, I was asked to take over the assistant wardenship of Kaveri Hostel.
So,
Kaveri Hostel, yes.
so this was from 61, 62, you had already
Yeah,
gotten it.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so some of your, so besides being a professor here
Yeah.
and teaching, being head of the physical chemistry part with Dr. M.V.C. Shastri here, you were also getting involved in other activities like wardenship.
Yeah, because I tell you why, because at that time, getting accommodation in was quite difficult, and since Professor Srinivasan was there and Aramadan was there, they had talked to the warden at that time, Kaveri Hostel, Dr. Venkateshwarlu, D. Venkateshwarlu, Chemical Engineering Department. He was an assistant professor. He was a warden also. So he offered to give me a room there, and the room that was given to me was that of the physical training instructor, who had married and he had taken a flat outside. So the room was much better, and this was next to an assistant warden's room, and it was very convenient. And then I started taking interest in the sort of students' activities and all that. Within 2 months, it so happened that another assistant warden, M.A. Velusamy, he was an applied mechanic, he had some problems, who resigned. So I was asked to take over the wardenship. I was actually in charge of the mess. A person who had never lived in the hostel and never eaten a mess, I had to become a mess assistant warden. I did it with my utmost, this one for about 6 months. And of course, coming to the personal matters, see, even before I came here, I had already seen a girl whom I was supposed to marry, because it was all arranged marriage. So I had I put one condition, that I will marry only after I submit my thesis. So since I submitted my thesis in May 62, so my marriage took place August 62, and therefore I had told the registrar at that time, I am not going to continue. I would like to spend my bachelor days in Mylapore, so Les Corner. And there was a reason for it, because during the early days when IIT came over here, the transport buses used to run both in the morning as well as in the evening from Saidapet and as well as from Mylapore Tank to IIT. So the bus from Mylapore Tank used to pass through Adyar, pick up all the faculty and staff. Similarly, from Saidapet it used to come. And the staff, both faculty and others, they all used to take the bus. Otherwise, they used to make their own arrangements. And I think by 62 only, the first 2 buses of IIT came, and they started running 1 or 2 more trips in between. So both morning and evening, one had to make use of the transport buses. So Mylapore was a convenient place, so that is why I went, and there were many others who were staying. I was staying in a lodge at a time called as Murray's Lodge. So even after marriage, I stayed for 2-3 months till the quarters got ready. The first person to occupy a sort of some place in the IIT was a security officer. And that was already, it was not a new building, it was an old building which was very near the warden's quarters or very near Taramani House. So it was a small building that he had to stay in the campus, so he was the first person to move. And then the second person to move was the director himself. So it so happened that the handing over of quarters got delayed, and then one of the faculty members of physics department had already given a notice to his owner in Adyar that he was going to leave by October or November 1962, and then he had to leave, and so he came and told the director, you see, I am supposed to leave tomorrow, what do I do? So overnight, one quarters what got ready near post office, opposite post office, they called D1 block, and then he was the first occupant other than the director. So this is how the whole thing started.
Professor Swami, so that was in the 60s.
Yeah.
So fast forward to the 70s, and you know your time. And you were here till the 90s. What changes have you seen in the
I will
department?
come to that. See, since I told you that 1961 we became an independent department.
Right.
So as soon as Professor Shastri came, we started drafting a syllabus. If as a chemistry as an independent subject. So same thing happened in. So I can say that first revision of syllabus took place in 1961. So there was one more thing which we did. So we didn't want to waste chemicals and all that. So we started semi-micro analysis. You see, the chemistry undergraduates first year BTech, they used to do only some quantitative analysis, estimation, and they used to do qualitative analysis. And qualitative analysis was being done in big tubes and all that. So we converted into semi-micro. So to make semi-micro kits, the drawings were given, they were made by companies, the glass tubes were made to that size, and we wrote our own manuals for it. We tested all the things, 3-4 of us, and we started the class. So I had already had experience of organizing the physical chemistry lab for the third year metallurgy students in 1961. I joined for that only. So in fact, some of the experiments I arranged was being done, maybe was possibly done by others in MSc later, experiments on phase rule, conductivity and other things. So because all the equipment I planned along with the head of the department, we got it. And so the first revision of syllabus took place, and then 1962, the first recruitment drive also took place. So we had Professor Kuriakose as a pool officer from January 62. He became an assistant professor, and one more gentleman joined who left within 3-4 months, and Professor C.N. Pillai, Professor Kalidas, they came over as lecturers. And then we had already, I was an associate lecturer, there was another Dr. Sharma was an associate lecturer. We had several technical assistants, both senior technical assistants. Well, when we chose the senior technical assistant, the idea was they will specialize either in inorganic or physical or organic. That means they should have worked in some places where they have that experience. The person from Indian Institute of Science who had already published work in analytical chemistry, of course, he had published along with the professor, V.R. Satyanarayana Rao was selected, V.R.S. Rao. For physical chemistry, one Ramaswamy, R. Ramaswamy was selected from Karaikudi, he had some publication. And for organic, we selected D.V. Ramana from Delhi University, who had worked with Professor T.R. Seshadri and microanalysis. And junior technical assistants are all BScs with 1 or 2 experiences. So the department expanded. The lectures were being taken only by the faculty. And Professor Shastri had his first health breakdown somewhere in 62. That was the time when I got married. So he seems to have told that I should not hold any sort of get together till he returns back. He returned back only after 2 months or so. There is something which I want to share, which some reason I possibly forgot. The chemistry department in 1962 itself, not only did we think of a new syllabus, we started what is known as a chemistry colloquium, where we get somebody to speak, give a lecture. And we wanted to inaugurate it. And so Dr. Rajappa, who was a student of Professor T.R. Govindachari, almost the foremost chemist or organic chemist in the city of Madras at the time, he was the principal of the Presidency College, we invited him to give the inaugural lecture. And this was held in the BSB. And the registrar, who was an IAS officer, Mr. Natarajan, was so happy about this because of the first club or whatever association was being started. And he took the initiative to send invitations to all the press. We got the invitations printed. He gave me a car to use if he wanted. Of his car was given. And then since the press was invited, press covered it. And almost all the institutions dealing with chemistry in city of Madras were invited. Well, there was a comic thing about that in this one, which I would possibly mention if necessary. Now the function was held in a fairly grand way, and then the colloquium had taken root. The second lecture was given by one Dr. Muthana, who was the director of Lacrosse Institute. Later he became a deputy director and director of IIT Kanpur, originally from IIT Kharagpur. So then this became a regular thing, and when there were no speakers from outside, one by one we used to give seminars. In fact, I gave a seminar along with a party, so invited all the faculty which were there, chemical engineering and other. We are a small group, so we used to call everybody, and then it was, so we started this in 62. So I moved into the quarters in 62 end or so. So 63, 62 I told you we recruited technical assistant. 63 we decided to start the MSc course. So, and the head of the department was very particular that all the technical assistants, they were only bachelor's degree holders, they should also have a chance to do masters. So he talked to the director, and both in physics and chemistry, they were permitted to join MSc degree. Only thing is, instead of 2 years MSc, they were supposed to complete in 3 years, because they had their own classwork to do and all that, regular administrative work. So all of them joined, and happy to say that all the 3 senior technical assistants, all of them retired as professors, all of them in separate fields of research, and one of the junior research assistants who continued, he retired as a professor, and he was a member of the board of governors also. So, and if necessary I can mention the names, it's not necessary now.
Please do. Do you remember?
Yeah, the Professor V.R.S. Rao, he worked in nuclear chemistry. Professor Ramaswamy, he worked on oscillatory reactions, and then what you call as, I try to forget the name, let me do it as oscillator reactions, electrochemistry. And then Professor Venkatachalam worked on electro-organic chemistry, and Professor D.V. Ramana worked on mass spectrometry, organic mass spectrometry. Each of them were trained abroad. Each of them did their work very well. So they got a number of students, number of publications. So it was good. So that is how Professor M.V.C. Sastry was appreciated by the Madras University, that he made a very good selection. So whether he recruited lecturers, whether recruited assistant professors, or recruited people who could take the department in a particular direction. Now, coming to the subjects of specialization and all that, now as I told you, Professor Kuriakose had already worked in catalysis along with Professor M. V. Shastri for some time in Kharagpur, and he had independently worked in Belgium and also USA. So he started his work in kinetics and catalysis, and Professor Shastri started on catalysis. Professor Aramadan, who was actually the only person in the whole of Asia, except possibly I don't know about Japan, who had worked in phase rule or phase equilibria in the Indian Institute of Science, he thought that he may not be able to continue that because he did build up an apparatus for it, but then he started doing analytical work. And Professor C.N. Pillai started doing work on organic chemistry. So this is how the four divisions, catalysis, kinetics and catalysis, the organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry came up. And then the 1965, again 64, Professor V. Ramakrishnan joined. He started, he is a person who had worked on theoretical chemistry and spectroscopy. So he joined as a lecturer. And then in 65, Dr. Ramdas joined. Again, he had worked in organic chemistry, but in a different type of area, and steroids and all that, with a lot of molecular transformations. He joined. 67, Dr. V. Mahadevan joined to work on organic polymer chemistry. And then 68, Dr. R. Narayan joined, who worked in Karaikudi, and abroad he had worked on electrochemical problems, corrosion. So we had in a way, so electrochemistry, kinetics catalysis, heterogeneous catalysis, organic chemistry, and organic chemistry both say what Professor Pillai was doing and Professor Ramdas started. So this was the situation as of up to 68 or so. But then let me tell you, I said about development of the department, the first 5-year program or the Indo-German program, it didn't include chemistry. The second program also didn't include chemistry. The third program, which started somewhere in 66 or 67, it included chemistry. And the group came, and in 66, there was one Professor Schmeiser, who was an inorganic chemist, preparative inorganic chemistry. He was the leader of the delegation. He visited Indian Science and then he came here. And then it so happened that year, I had become a lecturer only in 65, and I was not very happy with whatever was happening, in the sense that I couldn't do independent research and all that. So I was thinking of going out, so I had told Professor Shastri, and 66 I applied for an international fellowship to Germany, and then 67 I was selected. But then the condition was that institute should give me deputation. That means they must pay my family the salary. The director had signed. But then when I went to him with my letter, he said that there is no guarantee that we should agree to that one. I was a bit taken aback. But then it so happened that Professor Schmeiser, who visited the lab, and Professor Shastri told him that this is so and so, and he has been selected, but then there is some problem, is being relieved. He said, I will talk to the director. No, any program that is that takes somebody to Germany, he must go. The reason why this happened was that along with the program, Indo-German program, some faculty will be sent to Germany on DARD, DAD program as you call it, Deite Akademische Austauschgemeinschaft. So that is how other engineering department had gone. Chemistry got the chance only then. So they said, if you are having that, why should we put? So in that, the director, they have their own choice. They can choose who they want. And anyway, I got a chance to go, and I went away in 67, not knowing what I was going to specialize in. But I went there to work in a nuclear research laboratory, and that too working on composites, which was a new word at that time. synergy, composites, all that was new. I worked on it for a few months, 8 months or so. I almost guided a person who was my betreuter, what you call as somebody who takes care of me, regular things. And he was doing a PhD in mechanical engineering. I helped him with his work by building some apparatus and all that. In fact, I built something which was actually taken into stock, something an electrode deposition and all that. Now, this introduced me to some new areas, not only ceramics, but composites, techniques which are used in welding like electron beam welding, in chemical vapor deposition, which is all words which are not heard of, sol gel transformation. So, all this, with this knowledge I came back, and then the head of the department was expecting that I will come with some knowledge of nuclear instrumentation. It was not the thing for which I was selected, because it was international workshop in chemical engineering and physical chemistry. So, they gave me training in something related to that. I was working actually in Institute of Material Science in Nuclear Research Center. My professor was an authority in powder metallurgy and ceramics. So, I learned something about a technique which was used at that time only in Germany and United States, what is known as isostatic hot pressing. Even in the place where I was working, this unit had been set up just at that time when I joined. We were doing the preliminary investigations. So, I actually worked on the properties of the samples, that the properties I measured was electrical conductivity and thermal conductivity. I used to enter the radiation labs. In fact, I used to enter the maximum radiation labs also, where I had to change my coat 3-4 times to enter those labs, but not to make any touch measurements, but only to use an apparatus which was kept there. So, I returned back, since there was no chance for me to do work on that area. So, when I was asked at one of the circulars which was sent, what is it that I would like to do? So, I naturally wrote saying, not knowing why the circular was issued, if I had been given a chance to build up a laboratory, I would have worked on these areas. And I would have had by now a PhD student or a master's student. This was mistaken by the head of the department. So, there was a smart, what you call disagreement or whatever it is. It led to some thing which upset my health. He sent word to me and he simply said, here is some work for you. I received some tenders and also some details about some equipment we are going to get from Germany. These are all in German language and you have studied German. Please translate and please let me know what is being written here. Specifications of equipment and all that. Once again my work started, so I had to start doing administrative work. Let me tell you, because there has nothing to do with, she was asking me about, you were asking me about
basically, I want to know, if, the fact, I think this is amazing, you've covered a lot of my questions.
Okay.
What I wanted to know is, when you came back and after all this happened, what area of specialization did you work on in the 70s when I was there?
Yeah.
Because all these names are familiar to me.
Sure. You see,
all the
what
names.
I did was, see, before I went itself, for Dr. Viswanathan's research work, I set up an apparatus for him. I did the calibration and I taught him how to work on it. Unfortunately, I couldn't work on it because, he as a PhD student, he had to work on it. It took a lot of time because it involved doing a lot of glass blowing and all that. So, in the meanwhile, I started setting up facilities and differential thermal analysis and magnetobalance. So, these were facilities which were not there. I set it up. And then in the department, the IIT Madras was the first to get a liquid nitrogen plant in 1964 from Philips liquid nitrogen plant, and I was involved in setting up the liquidization plant and running the plant for a few months till I trained up a mechanic, and then he could take care. Of course, the plant was, it had worked with a lot of least efficiency because we didn't have cold water to cool. It was 11 HP motor which were using it, and we didn't have a cooling system. So the whole thing used to break down within 1 hour, 2 hours, and we supplied liquid nitrogen even to Cancer Institute. They used to bring their cell samples and they used to do experiments here. Then I used to tell them, okay, I will give you a Dewar flask filled with liquid nitrogen, to take it with you. And I want to tell you about research work as such which started. You know, even in the BSP, when we were in the small 2 labs in the preparation lab, Professor Aramadan started some work with a technical assistant, and he published a paper in analytical chemistry. And this is a record because research work done in the preparation lab. And then Professor C.N. Pillai, he set up an apparatus on the windowsill. See, if you go and see the BSB, you see, usually when you have a window, you have a block outside so that there is no rain coming in and all that. For the sake of having more space inside the lab, the first director, Professor Sen Gupta, pushed the window back so that that space, you know, is used for cupboards and all that. But unfortunately, it used rainwater used to come in. Whatever it is, on the windowsill, he set up a reactor. And then a lady who was the daughter of a professor of applied mechanics, German professor, a German lady started working on it, Miss Ellen Howe, and he even published a note in Current Science, a research note on that work. So this is the way we said, whatever happens, we must do our research work. So I could not do anything till 69, 69, one student, Marumuthu, who later became Vice Chancellor of Madurai University, Kamaraj University, he was the first student who joined for a master's project. He worked in adsorption, and then Miss Sita Lakshmi,
Yes.
she joined, and by that time, you know, I had passed through a lot of health problems in 69, and I was asked to work on a gravimetric unit, and so we did some work on the measurement of weight changes during adsorption, and we did some thermodynamic calculations, and then we published a paper also, and she continued for her master's, PhD for 1 year. By then she got married and she had to leave because she had married an Air Force officer who was on transfer. So again there was a break, and that was the time that the new block, that is applied chemistry block, came up, and the foundation of the applied chemistry block was laid in 68 or 69. I was not very much involved in the construction or anything, whereas I was completely involved when the HSB was set up. And in the new building, so only certain labs were provided space, but then Professor Kuriakose and 1 or 2 others could not be accommodated there because the way it was planned. So they stayed back here, and the director at that time, Professor A. Ramachandran, gave them some more space. And well, let me not go into some other aspects regarding my own profession, my own promotion and all that. I decided to move to the new block, so I just went and occupied a room. And I started working there. I asked the head of the department, show me a space to build up. So he came and showed me a place. So I started building. I had research students. So we started doing the nitrous oxide decomposition. So that was the first one. And then we took systems which were not investigated by others. And it later took isopropyl alcohol or 2-propanol decomposition. So this was the first PhD project which was completed by C.S. Narasimhan, he was the first student. The nitrous oxide decomposition was done by the second student. I am happy to say that both these students, even before they completed their thesis work, were selected by the Hindustan Liver Research Center for as technical staff, because getting jobs was difficult, but anyway they were selected, but they both submitted and they got their degrees. And then there was a gap, and I must tell you at this time what I did in Germany, whether I utilized or not. I said I don't want to talk about the promotion aspect of it, but then A. Ramachandran, who was the director, was very much impressed by the work that was done there. And in an interview in 1971, he tried to tell about or highlight the work that I had done in Germany, how it is very important for defense work. And he told me that your expertise is required for Defense Metallurgical Laboratory. I didn't know at that time that he was the chairman of the Research Council of DMRL at Hyderabad. And because of something which happened during the selection, it so happened I had to meet him. And then certain things he revealed to me was upsetting to me. I had to answer back to him. But he told me, don't worry about all that. I am going to set up a committee of 3 professors and you will be the coordinator. I was a lecturer. He said, you will be a coordinator. You are going to start working on composites. And I must tell you, I mean with all this one, that one requires certain directors, certain type of director. He was the person who could start the metal forming lab, metal joining lab, metal casting lab, that is the 3, because he said mechanical engineering is not just workshop. So mechanical engineering is practical. So he was the person who started it. And he went and told the metallurgy department, all the professors had basic background of physics. So they were all physical metallurgists. Metallurgy is not just physical metallurgy. Nobody is doing work in ceramics. Nobody is doing work in powder metallurgy. What sort of work is this? And funnily, I was appointed as a convener of a committee consisting of the head of the department of metallurgy, head of the department of chemical engineering, and a professor in mechanical engineering. And instead of my going to them, he has asked them to meet me. And then with the head of the department of chemical engineering, I drafted a syllabus of BTech in ceramic engineering. This was all in 71, 72. BTech in ceramic engineering. And we said that this could be taken in the 5 year, say at the 3rd year or 4th year and 5th year, the specialization. They could till then they work metallurgy or whatever specialization, they could take it in courses in ceramic engineering. The reason was only Banaras Hindu University was giving a bachelor's degree in ceramic engineering at that time. It was not very good. So Ramachandran wanted it. And similarly, metallurgy, he went and told them about me. And then I got one day a phone call saying, you are going to take classes in Indian Engineering College on advanced powder metallurgy for BE students there. So I conducted a 1 semester course in Indian Engineering College. And I was later asked by the head of the department of metallurgy to take students for masters in metallurgy and PhD in metallurgy. So one student joined me in PhD metallurgy. It was very unfortunate that he did not submit his PhD thesis, but the work he did is something which nobody else has done in the metallurgy part. I have no pictures of it. It is there, but it was all in slides which I lost. But then we built isostatic pressing unit, hydrostatic pressing. This was built in the metal forming lab. We could get probes or whatever samples. I don't think I have samples now. With you see, normally when you do with certain types of pressing techniques and all that, you only have the length diameter. You see, when you make a pellet, there is a length which is nothing but the height, diameter. So, you can only have the length will always be shorter than the diameter when you do a stamping. See, look at the tablets, the medical tablets that we have got. Whereas, if you want to have the length more than the diameter, that is long ones, then you have to do it under isostatic conditions. There was no facility. So, the principle of isostatic pressing is very simple, but to achieve it practically is very difficult. So, I used a regular press, hydraulic press which is available in the metal forming lab, 500 ton. We thought for a while, the autoclave was built in the central workshop. The necessary whatever was required was all built, the O-rings and all that, the rubber wax, and we did the experiment, and then it was a success. So, it was publicized, but I did not want to do a newspaper publication, but it was known to industries outside, and we did work for certain industry. But then we in fact wanted to start an industry, the student wanted to start an industry, but then due to certain problems, political problems, that was dropped, because whoever was to finance this industry was told us that you are going to burn your fingers. You know, it was something to do with magnets.
But Professor Swami, so I think you've had a very interesting career in IIT. But I also want to know a little bit about your hobbies. I know, I have a feeling that you were interested in photography. Can you tell us a few words about that?
No, it is just like, see, I purchased a camera in Germany during my visit. So, naturally, I thought if you want to do, say, static photography and to sceneries and all that, you must have a tripod. So, I purchased a tripod, and then I used to take sceneries and with tripods, and then even in IIT during that the annual festival, like just a sarang or something.
Institute Day?
I used to, no, somewhere when all the lights used to be put on the entire, from Gajendra Circle to the that is, I think, some cultural festival. In fact, I had taken, I don't have now, I had mounted the tripod at the Gajendra Circle in several places and taken the illumination. In fact, I had taken even the administrative block, and I had gone on the top of the block. I had taken photographs of the quarters, hostels and all that. So, it is only interest, but then it is a very costly hobby. It is a very costly hobby, and initially I think I burnt quite a lot of money because I had bought a projector also. So, I used to take positive, what you saw, the positive slides. It is, see, negative means you have to once again print it and then convert it and also print it, it costs more money. Here at least you just develop it and then you can show picture. But then keeping a projector and again projector lamps we could not get here. So, all this became a big problem. And now you know we have come to an age where everything is in the phone. So, I can say I was interested, but I couldn't pursue that hobby. But then as regards the photographs which I took, it is not every one of them were not taken by me, except as I was just mentioning as a small thing. You know, when the foundation stone for the applied chemistry block was laid, so I don't know what was the reason. The Professor Shastri simply said that there is a camera lying in the department, and why don't you buy a negative and then take a few pictures. But I was a bit hesitant, no photographer came, so I took some distance shots of the program. So, that is what I think she must have just copied now. And I also held a 1 hour program in the department where I showed all the slides I had taken. And I requested some of my colleagues also. In fact, like that we spent an evening after a cup of coffee. I don't know whether you were there, it was all before you joined,
Okay.
in 68 or 69. Now, let me tell something about the chemistry colloquium. The chemistry colloquium ran for some time, then it stopped. Professor Dr. K. Narayanan was the person who took over from me, was running it. And then Professor M.S. Shastri retired in 74. By then, we had already been compelled to run a summer school. 1972, Professor Kuriakose ran a summer school, QIP summer school, in which I also gave lectures and all that. And based on that notes that we had prepared, Professor Kuriakose wanted to bring out a book. Well, there was not much cooperation coming, as I had written my chapters and given, but then I decided that we should not hold it up. So I told him, you carry on. So he published along with Professor Rajaram. And afterwards we had winter schools and summer schools. In fact, in 1979, I organized the summer school along with Professor Kuriakose. And it was a very bad year because we had a very big floods. Bridge fell down in Andhra Pradesh, cyclone. So all the participants in North India could not come. So both from the eastern side and this upper side. So where we had expected 40 participants, we got only 20 participants. So it was in 70, it was a 1 month program. I had planned lectures from the students, projects work. So I was running a overhead transparency. I used to give them roles to write, and then all that we arranged. It's very nicely. And one thing which we started during Professor Kuriakose's time was to have the annual symposium. I don't know whether you attended it. Yeah, you must have attended.
I have attended.
We started it because the University of Madras started these projects for MSc students. So they themselves came and requested, you are people who are doing MSc projects, we don't know how to do this, so we would like to have some combined. So that is all, for their sake we started holding. But they were supposed to collaborate every time, but it so happened that we were spending all the time arranging for it, and they used to come only to present a few papers and eat and go. So to arrange a symposium was not easy because we had to arrange for lunch and everything also. So it happened for about 10, 12 years, and I think it also. And later we used to have some sort of a special lectures by faculty. So this sort of thing started in the late 80s.
We also did something in the 70s where we collaborated with Indian Institute of Science.
No,
Professors
not
used to
Indian
come.
Institute of Science. We collaborated with Kalpakam. Kalpakam.
Correct.
So, and let me tell you that by 80s, well, 80s itself things started changing, and chemistry department has not only the sort of reputation for starting research work, even a preparation laboratory, and producing quite a number of doctorates in the initial years. And by about 1975 onwards, we started having association with industries. You may ask me how. It was again in the field of catalysis. In 1973, a meeting was held in Banaras University, where Professor S.K. Bhattacharya was the visiting professor, as our retired emeritus professor. And Professor Kuriakose had gone there. I did not know about the meeting. And then they decided to form a Catalysis Society of India with headquarters in Department of Chemistry, IIT Madras, because Professor Kuriakose was elected as the secretary. Till today, that office is in the Department of Chemistry. And the first National Symposium of Catalysis was held in 1974, December, the year in which Professor Kuriakose took charge as head of the department. And second symposium in IIT Kharagpur, and I don't know how many symposia have taken place till today. Then I can just tell that somewhere in 1997, the Indian Institute of Petroleum, Dehradun, said that they were arranging the Silver Jubilee Symposium. So the Silver Jubilee meeting, you can say. So there is to honor, I think, I don't know how many people who had contributed to the area of heterogeneous catalysis. And in this way, this particular plate was sent to me. I didn't attend this, I was invited. This is for, in recognition of lifetime contributions to the field of catalysis, science and technology. So we introduced, I was the treasurer of this society for 10 years, 1980 to 1980. During this period, I was also a member of the International Congress of Catalysis for a period of 4 years, at which time the Congress was held in Berlin. For some reason, I could not attend because, you know, at 1984, I was sent to England. I went to UK to, we had purchased the surface electron microscopy, photoelectron microscopy, or XPS as we call it, XPS, X-ray photoelectron spectrometer from VG Industries. And so as a part of the contract, they were supposed to give training for 2 people. And so I went as a faculty member. I took an operating assistant also with me. And as a part of it, I was allowed to go visit any universities in UK or elsewhere. So I visited Germany because I had spent 3 months in Germany in 1981. If not working, at least following the work in this photoelectron spectroscopy. So somehow I felt that when I came back after 84, I became an adjunct faculty of RSIC, Regional South Information Center. Now, I don't want to go into origins of that, maybe there is a different program about it. RSIC was an offshoot of the third Indo-German program where chemistry was included. All the instruments we got, spectrometers, all that, we put it in a separate wing and we called it a special instruments laboratory. But for reasons of his own, Professor A. Ramachandran called it as a different sort of a thing, and spectroscopists were appointed. Professor P.T. Manoharan became the head of the center, and that was the nucleus of the regional soft scale instrument center, which was started by A. Ramachandran when he was the first secretary of DST, Department of Science and Technology. In fact, the South India was the first one where it started, that is in IIT Madras, service organization. Now, can I just...
Please.
So
please.
then 1983, we arranged a workshop in under catalysis, first time, for fertilizer and petrochemical industries, and we united the Madras Petroleum, what do you call it? It was Madras Petroleum earlier. MRL, Madras Refineries Limited. Madras Refineries Limited. The chairman managing director one, Mr. Deen Dayalu, he not only inaugurated the function, and he also made a mention that they were prepared to give a grant to 25 lakhs to the catalysis group, chemistry department, to work on developing a new catalyst for what is known as fluid catalytic cracking. So at that time, this was very much necessary. Already a group was working in Indian Institute of Petroleum and National Chemical Laboratory and all those groups, but we did it independently. I am glad to say, although we worked for 8 or 9 years, even after retirement of Professor Kuriakose and Professor Srinivasan, we completed, and we could show even at the semi-pilot plant scale that the catalyst we had developed could be used. Only thing was, the company which did this test at Haldia or in Calcutta, they wanted MRL to write out a contract for 1 crore. That is, whether they would work on it.
Yeah.
Reason being that they wanted to invest money on trying the chemicals.
It's amazing, sir. I think we've heard so much from you. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah.
You gave
Thank
us a very wonderful
Yeah.
idea of what's going on in IIT.
Okay, thank you very
you
much.
so much.
Thank you.